What's going on, y'all, and welcome back to another Epic 7 video. Today we have our Lone Crescent Bellona honest review. So if you've seen one of these before, we're going to go over everything, skill enhancements, artifacts, gearing, show some gameplay, as well as my overall thoughts on whether or not I think you should pull for this lovely lady, Lone Crescent Bellona here. I think she's one of the most controversial units, at least from what I've seen people judge her on. So I have my full thoughts. Please stay tuned till the very end where I'll wrap it all up and hopefully guide some of y'all on whether or not to pull for her. As I've seen a lot of people say, she doesn't feel amazing. Some people did like her. You'll hear my thoughts on all that here in just a second. So thank you so much for tuning in. Let's get to it. Real quick, before we start the guide, I have two questions for y'all. Number one, what are we going to call her? What is the community going to be calling Lone Crescent Bellona? I've heard LCB, MLB, ML Bell. I think a lot of people are saying Bellona. What have you guys been personally calling her so I know what to use as a nickname? I think we all got to decide together. Number two, if you do decide to summon her at the end of the video, or maybe you summoned her already, please let me know how your summons go. Mine were luckily okay. Pretty good, actually, but I had a lot of people in my Twitch chat earlier say they one-tapped her, so I kind of felt like a pity was coming on, but luckily we got her in under 4,000 mystics, and we even picked up a Fire Charlotte and a Border Coin along the way, so I can't complain. I'll take that any day of the week. All right, let's go ahead and start the guide. All right, guys, let's do a quick overview on my stats, what build I chose for Lone Crescent Bellona. Some of y'all are probably looking at it and thinking, what the heck is going on here? Because it might be different than a lot of Lone Crescent Bellonas you've already seen. We'll start with the attack. My attack is pretty low here. She will get a lot of free attack, right, from the likes of her skill 2, the Waxing Crescent, but the attack is just fine in this build because I have pretty high crit damage. I'm pretty much capped 9% off, and if you weren't aware, guys, you can't overcap crit damage unless you're using like artifacts like Draco Plate. So our crit damage makes up for the lack of attack, and just like that, the defense and health are also probably not what you're going to see on a lot of other Lone Crescent Bellonas, but the overall effective HP is good. It's just you'll probably see a lot more balance, probably higher defense and lower health on other builds. The speed here is one where I think a lot of people are going to be testing out right now. I think I have a much higher speed than a lot of other builds. At the moment, I have some pretty nice speed subs here, like at this ring, for example. But it's all balanced out, guys. There's only 4 on the neck. You don't need crazy speed subs. It's kind of just what I decided to pull. And honestly, a lot of this gear is from Apocalypse Ravi. I have a very Apocalypse Ravi-esque kind of stat line. As they're both, you know, bruisers that have a lot of free crit. Or Lone Crescent Bellona doesn't crit. Apocalypse Ravi gets a lot of free crit. So I kind of just use that gear. I will probably change this up in the future. I want to try like the counter build, the lifesteal build. I want to try the lower speed build, but right now, let me tell you guys, this build worked just fine. I think one of Lone Crescent Bellona's biggest strengths is how flexible she is with stats, how good her bruiser stat line can be, right, when you gear her appropriately. And so I think just use what you have, guys. As long as your health and defense, your bulk, overall bulk is good, don't sweat the little stuff too much, and make sure you're right. You just have enough damage on the table too. And then we'll talk about speed later on in the video, because I have heard the low speed build, the 0 speed builds can be very effective as well, but I like having speed on her for my own playstyle. I will test that other one out though too. Quickly talking about her skills, I think most of us know what she does, but we'll recap it real quick. Yes, one, right? So all of her skills are going to grant a successful crit, on a successful attack. So as long as it doesn't miss, it's always a crit. So this is going to be a game changer versus anti-crit, game changer versus units like Senya, Shu. Very, very nice. And the added bonus, like I mentioned, we don't have to build any crit chance, so her stats can go all over the place for which is really nice for a bruiser, right? So grants immunity, always crits. Waxing Crescent, this thing stacks up attack. It's Fighting Spirit. She's a Fighting Spirit unit, which is good because focus units right now get really, really countered by units like Solitaria, who is very prevalent in the current meta. So I really like that she's Fighting Spirit, unlike Seaside Bellona. And remember, this isn't a counterattack, guys. You might hear me refer to it as a counter. Some people might call it a counter, but it's that AoE clapback, right? The rebuttal. But it doesn't have to, it doesn't follow any of the counter rules. So it's actually a lot better in some regards. So always crits. Combat readiness, which is very good. Nothing to scoff at. This is the reason I think the low speed builds can work. But just very good as well if you have speed too, because then you can cycle even faster and take those turns. The Quixotic Crescent, am I saying that right, by the way, guys? Quixotic, let me know how we're supposed to say that. But this is probably the toughest skill to use. Very nice, does respectable damage. If you have a buff, it does even more. Remember though, we apply the Vigor buff to herself after we use the skill 3. So you kind of want, if you have immunity, that means your first, if you have immunity set, I have pen set here. But if you have like immunity, for example, you can give yourself that buff. Otherwise, if you want to get that max damage, at least on turn 1, you need to have a unit go before and buff her, just so she can get that added bonus, because the Vigor buff for herself ends up using or going on after using the skill. The reason I think this is a tough skill to use, or not tough to use, but it's kind of like where we're going to learn how to really optimize her abilities, is just like Edward Elric. The soul burn effect is exactly the same, and a lot of times you're going to want to be holding this so that you can get that first skill 3 off with the 10 souls, get that big skill cooldown decrease, and start cycling her and just using that skill 3 back to back to back, right? I mean, you have a 1-turn cooldown, but you guys know what I mean. The problem is, I think a lot of times you may want to rip it early because you get the vigor buff and you start, you know, scaling into the Swaxing Crescent even sooner, getting that attack scaling up. And a lot of times I think I was too greedy trying to wait for souls when I would have been better off, especially when she's getting focused, to get that vigor up and just, you know, wait out those 4 extra turns without soul burning. But that's something I'm learning. I really enjoy the skill 3. If you guys ever get to kill a squishy unit, give your team entire team vigor up. It's very, very powerful. And I think just overall her kit is very fun, very, very basic. The overall kit, I'm going to touch on this at the end, guys, but it's nothing revolutionary. So that's why we'll wrap it up at the end on whether or not she's a must pull. But I love this style of unit. Just start identifying right now if this sort of unit is for you, right? A bruiser style unit that has a very, very strong stat line, has utility in the forms of being able to buff, give yourself self-immunity, and as well as has like a unique kind of, I'm going to say it again, guys, counter mechanic, but you guys know what I mean. A sort of, it has reach, right? Can hit AoE. And it, you know, it breaks some certain rules. So overall, that's the stat line. That's the skill section. Let's go ahead and break down the next part. Okay, let's briefly talk about the skill enhancements and then branch into the artifacts. And then we're going to really delve into Lone Crescent Bellona in terms of how I found her, etc. But real quick, guys, for the skill enhancements, as y'all, probably some of y'all have guessed, she's a bruiser unit. She's a damage dealer, so we really just want a plus 15er. No ifs, ands, or buts. I guess if you are really strapped for Mola or Catalyst and you can enhance everything, at least right now, remember, try to get plus 15 when you can if you do plan to use her in the long run. And if you pull her, you should use her. But maybe if you're lower speed build, go for like skill 1 last, skimp there. Try to get these 2 maxed out first, but really try to aim for that plus 15. Okay, boys? Now, artifact selection. I mentioned I wanted to try a lifesteal build, a counter build. I think a lot of those builds can work. I think destruction is great. Pen set is great, but I've seen people work well on immunity. So destruction, immunity, lifesteal, penetration set or counter set, all those I think are viable right now. We'll really find out here in the coming weeks, and especially when the RTA season starts, where maybe the optimal build will end up. But I think this kind of unit can be catered to your own style, so use what you have available. Obviously don't use crit set or anything like that, but I think right now destruction and lifesteal are looking very good, and I still need to hear if anyone's using counter set yet to great effect. But yeah, destruction and lifesteal for sure, and then use either pen or immunity. That would be my suggestion. Let me show you guys the actual substats here real quick, and then we're going to talk about the artifacts. One minor note on speed, I don't know if I touched on it. The speed in particular here, it's just I have 190, but that's not really that important. I like it for my own playstyle and cycling. I have a ring here with 22, but then the neck only has 4, so I don't think you need like some crazy speed subs. And like I keep mentioning, I think the lower speed build variants can work as well. Now for artifacts, guys, I think it's just, let's start with the bread and butter, the super basics. If you are in destruction, I think you go Sigurd Scythe, because having that sustain and, you know, sustaining off skill 3, skill 1, and especially those skill 2s, which happen out of turn, is very, very important. And obviously, we get that added benefit, excuse me, of increasing attack as well. Sigurd Scythe, just an amazing artifact for units like this. If you aren't using, if you're on lifesteal set, then I think Draco Plate is probably the best in slots. So if you're lifesteal, go Draco Plate. If you're not lifesteal, if you're on like destruction, for example, I would go Sigurd Scythe. But that's pretty much it. I'm sure since she's such a flexible unit, there will be some other viable arties, but if you guys start with those 2, at least right now, you're never gonna feel bad about it. It's gonna be probably the best 2 in slots for the most basic builds, at least right now. All right, y'all, we made it to the final segment of the video, the honest review. How does Lone Crescent Bellona rate? Is she worth your up to 10,000 hard-earned mystics? Is she a must pull? Long story short, no, she's not, guys. Unlike units like Meteor Decoy, Conquer Lilia, Spectre Tenebria, she doesn't, you know, like Lua, who, you know, we shouldn't compare any units to those because some of those are absolutely broken, but unfortunately they do exist. They bring unique mechanics to the table, or they make the match, you know, they polarize the match a certain way where you have to deal with them. Lone Crescent Bellona is just a very, very solid bruiser style unit. On top of that, I've seen a lot of people say she feels underwhelming, and I think that's because some players like to play that very aggressive, fast, or cleaver play style, where Lone Crescent Bellona, to me at least, is more of like a a bruiser type unit that wants to grind you down. It's seen in her skill 2 where she's going to want to build up that attack, cycle those skill 3s, eventually land that kill, and, you know, take home the match with that vigor up for the team, with the, you know, her very nice stat line where she's going to be hard to kill and have that sustain via lifesteal or Sigurd's Scythe. So if you're not that tank standard bruiser player, if you're more of a cleaver, even if you need an anchor unit, guys, and I'm not going to get too technical, I have new players watching, but for cleavers out there that need an anchor, I think other units do it better. Lone Crescent Bellona has no inherent mitigation. She has quite a few counters like Rowana. She's very hard to play into cleave. Like I mentioned, with no mitigation, sometimes she can die. But when you pick her carefully, and you don't even have to pick her super carefully, she doesn't need a lot of support either. She's a very self-sustaining unit. I think she can work very, very well in a lot of matches, at least in the standard style. So if you just need a solid bruiser, guys, I think Lone Crescent Bellona is it. I think if you are a tankier player, I really would suggest looking into picking her up. But of course, if you need, like I mentioned, something more unique, like that Mediator Coeric that just, you know, is kind of busted, you may want to save Mystics for that and then pick up Lone Crescent Bellona later down the line. That being said, for me personally, guys, looks 10 out of 10. Kit was tailor-made for me. I love these bruiser style units, and I think she's actually very, very good, just not quite that triple S tier of all those other busted units. So no unique mechanics, not a must pull, but if you are a tanky bruiser style player, I would really consider picking her up. All right, I think that wraps it up there, guys. If you have any extra questions, please leave them in the comments below or stop by the Twitch stream. I'll be testing out all different types of builds. I'm loving Lone Crescent Bellona, so I'm going to try everything out, and I think she's very solid. I was force picking her in the first pick spot in RTA all day today, and she always felt good, with a very rare exception of like an all-out cleave. On top of that, we talked about her always critting, guys. If you're an Arena or Guild Wars player, you know you fight those shoes, those Senyas, sometimes even DNs with anti-crit. She is absolutely amazing versus those comps. So she has some utility outside of just real-time Arena as well. All right, we'll wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Good luck on your pulls. If you do decide to pull, let me know how they go. And I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace out, y'all.